I will kick this off. My name is Margaret McGilvery, and I'm from Econometrica, which is the TA provider helping HUD with these peer exchanges. And this is our fourth of our education and COVID-19 peer exchanges. We began these back in August and have continued with them throughout this fall and had our last call in mid-November. And this will be our final call for, if folks can mute, that would be helpful because I think we're getting some feedback. Anyway, if this is our last call for 2020, but we will be continuing into January, and actually our next call is scheduled for, oh, I should have had this at my fingertips, is for January 19th. And we will be using some of what we learned today on the call to help fashion the topics for that call, but you can pencil in January 19th for the next one of these calls. We are doing this in a shorter time frame today, and we are utilizing breakouts. So I want to minimize my introduction, and I will just turn it back over to Wendy Lopez Alfredo, who was also our facilitator on our previous call. But for those of you who weren't on that call, Wendy is the Vice President of Content and Partnerships for Learning Heroes, which is a national nonprofit whose mission is to inspire and equip parents to enable their children to succeed. So we have found that the marriage of Learning Heroes, and particularly Wendy, and this peer exchange group has been really a good connection. So I turn it over to Wendy.
Thanks so much, Margaret, and everyone for joining. We are really looking forward to considering this sort of a session, part two, but no worries for those of you that weren't on the first session, you'll be able to quickly jump in. We have really two main priorities today. That is to go a little bit deeper into the priority areas that you identified as most important during our last session, which were social emotional learning with a focus on motivating learners and students, and how we can support parents in that effort, which we know is so challenging with all the changes happening. And the second topic, which I think is related in a lot of ways actually, is communicating with schools and with teachers. So we're going to go through sort of just a quick review of some of the ideas that we shared last time, but then take a much closer look to some of the free resources that you can use and use them hopefully in an organic way by integrating them into the work that you are already doing. And then we're going to spend the majority of our time, which we are excited about, in small breakups, as Margaret mentioned. So this is a time for us to problem solve together, to learn from each other, and to begin some action planning around these two specific topics, but obviously through the lens of your work more broadly in education. So with that, as I shared, and I believe we had recirculated the handout from last time, we had put together a handout with some tips and some free resources. And on our last session in our poll, you shared that really the topic of social emotional learning and specifically motivation was important to you. And interestingly, you are not alone. So we at Learning Heroes have been taking in questions from parents across the country since doing a big town hall in October. And the topic or the issue really of keeping kids motivated and interested in learning has continued to be at the top of parents' concerns, in addition to very specific questions around academics. So we worked in concert with CCSSO and started a Ask a Teacher video series, which is really about connecting real world parents and their questions with Teachers of the Year to give them just some practical advice in the form of these videos. We also have a growth mindset interactive resource, which I'm going to take you through. And finally, want to focus on the topic of how to support parents with getting their children to listen without having to yell. So these were some of the things that we thought we would hone on. And before I show you these resources, want to just sort of take a step back and sort of more broadly around the topic of motivation. Some of the ideas that we had talked about last time, and that you'll see really highlighted in the handout is, for parents, to me, while this is the topic of motivation is clearly challenging, and I have a 6-year-old, I think I shared on last time, and a 3-year-old, and I'm living this, and continue to push myself to sort of innovate based on what I know. But while it is challenging, there really is a silver lining in all of this, and that I really believe that parents are the experts of their children. They know their children best, right? We know what interests our child, and experts will say, as you'll see in some of the videos, that one of the main ways to keep kids motivated and learning is to make sure that learning is relevant to them, right? That it's meaningful. So for us, that can mean making sure that we're, allowing time for kids to read around topics that interest them. Helping them connect the dots between what they're learning virtually online in their classes and what interests them. One of the other pieces of advice that experts give us around keeping kids motivated is around helping them feel that they can be successful. That is fundamental for us as human beings to keep us motivated. And that's where growth mindset comes in, right? Growth mindset is a jargony word. Parents don't understand it. I don't necessarily recommend that you throw that term at them, but we can break it down for them, right? Essentially, growth mindset is around seeing that effort and hard work is what leads us to success, right? We are not born brilliant. We have to work at it. And so using that kind of language is what can help parents. So I wanted to just sort of give that as sort of a foundation as we look into these resources. And I think these are all things that are also can be shared in a really organic way as part of what you're already doing. So with that, wanted to click through, and hopefully technology will work with me here. So I mentioned that we started this campaign with CCSSO, wanted to, and all of these links will be provided to you. These are all in the deck and in the hand, so they're also in the handout from last time. But what you'll see here is a landing page of real world questions from parents across the country. And we have worked with National Teachers of the Year to answer their questions in short videos. Most of these are about under 2 minutes. And sorry, good question. CCSSO is the council for, it's the state chief officers. So basically these are the folks that, the state departments, the national organization. And so they run a program called the State Teachers of the Year Award. These are basically, excellent teachers, teacher leaders, doing great work and innovative work. They've done that program really successfully. And so we partnered with them to sort of bring these master teachers to all parents in answering their questions. So you'll see here, these are just short videos. Motivation is right at the top. So parents asking questions like, what are strategies to get children to do the work that, if they are resisting, and that teacher talks about, small bite-sized goals and making it feel, real. There's another question around, keeping child's interests, and a teacher goes into, like I just shared, leaning into their interests. So these are all short videos. And some just quick suggestions on how you might be able to use them. You can text them to parents. You can continue to listen and take in questions from parents. And as you see points of connection, share these with them, either via text, as I mentioned, or if you're doing any, in-person still workshops, you can share it with them, hear their thoughts to any of these responses. It's broken down by theme, which we have found to be really effective in communicating with parents. We have found that sometimes when we just sort of list out resources, it's too much for them, but really aligning it by theme lets them sort through based on what they're interested in. We also have some questions that are in written format. If that's easier for you, again, you can share this in, via social or in person. But it's basically meant to do a couple of things: inspire you to sort of connect your parents with some answers. Hopefully, also just motivation for parents, right, to help them see that they're not alone. So that was one resource that I wanted to connect you to. Also, in addition to all of these short videos, again, all fueled by real world questions, linked to this page is also a search engine. A big part of what Learning Heroes does is curate great content from our partner resources, from our partner organizations. So we work closely with PBS and Khan Academy, and a whole host of others. So we have taken, and apologies, this is my computer that's loading slowly. We have a whole set of additional videos from the town hall that we did, along with other resources by topic. So it's not just these short videos, but even more in-depth sort of interactive resources for parents to use, and again, that you can share with parents in the context of your existing work. So that was one resource. The other resource that I wanted to really share with you, again, this notion of growth mindset, I think is really important in this moment in time, where we can be helping parents in a very concrete, this is super actionable. I check myself with language all the time, simple things like, instead of saying, wow, you are so smart, you got an A on that test, saying things like, especially with my first grader, for those of you who have first graders know, young kids do not like to fail. They simply just don't, they feel embarrassed. They don't like it. They don't like to have to, erase that misspelled word. So, saying things like, wow, you studied really hard on those sight words and you knew only 3 last week. Now you know 7, making it really concrete about the effort. And so what this tool does is it gives you language. This is just sort of a little check-in quiz that you can do with parents to see, what their sort of thoughts are about, growth mindset. But then it gives you really exact language, right? It gives you concrete language of, children with growth mindsets versus a fixed mindset. And growth mindset, again, is just knowing that it's that effort and that work that leads you to success. It gives parents videos on the kinds of language to use. It gives parents suggestions on making the most of failure. Again, especially for young children who don't like to fail, don't want to disappoint themselves or parents. This is, we need to be really intentional about that. So again, you'll see just some statement language. And it's interactive. So this is something that you can send to a parent or you can do with them. And it's pretty extensive. There's videos, like I said, example language. Are you using, this is the part that I wanted to show you guys, can you identify which statements below reflected a growth mindset, and this is an example. It looks like that was too easy. Let's give you something a bit more challenging. These are the kinds of things that we want to help parents. You are so smart. Yes, it's great to help our children feel smart, but we don't want to feel like they either are or they aren't. We all are always continuously learning and evolving and growing. And so we really want to make sure that we're giving children that positive reinforcement while helping them see that it is that work and that effort that will get them there. Again, examples like, I know it was hard, but look how hard your effort paid off. And there's lots of videos in there. Again, we've seen that videos really do help parents. They want to understand what it looks like. And these are things that you can share in person or digitally. And then finally, I want to make sure I'm doing a quick time check. The idea of, again, minimizing yelling. This has been a time of high stress for all of us as parents. And sometimes, we do slip and we yell. And I think it's important for us working with parents directly to let them know that that happens. And when that happens, it's important to acknowledge it and apologize to our children and let them know that we're human too, and we're managing a lot. But there are some really simple strategies that can help parents avoid that, right? I love this one. I'm not going to go through all of them. I just wanted to point you to this resource. I'm going to highlight just a couple for the sake of time. But the idea of taking the opposite tone, right? We sometimes allow things to sort of elevate in our homes, and before you know it, there's this culture of yelling. And so there's different ways that you can use tone, right? Like my father used it in my house, I'm Latina, he just had to give us a look, right? And I know for many of us, like that's enough. But I recently read another article that had to do with this, and they said, try whispering to your children, especially for young children. Like I whisper to my 3-year-old and she's like, what's going on? She's suddenly interested. And so just, playing around a little bit and thinking of being really intentional about how we sort of manage our pitch and our tone. The second one is about, there's that cliche, being a broken record, but especially young children need really simple, 1 or 2 step instructions, and just repeating it, right? Making sure that we are getting there, as opposed to, letting them saying, do your homework, make your bed, and then come down and help me with your sister, right? Like that's just a lot for a child to take in. So focus in on those 1 to 2 key steps, and continue to know that we do have to repeat it, right? And then I'm going to stop here after the next one, but there's a whole host of really great tips, including making it fun, which I think sort of goes along with like the whisper idea. But knowing where we can have healthy negotiation. I know this is something that I struggle with. My 6-year-old is always negotiating with us. But kids want to have a sense of autonomy and a sense of power. And that's a good thing, right? So making sure that we are showing families, again, concrete language. And I think this article does a great job of that. Without turning it into a power struggle, how you can allow for questions, right? So giving kids some autonomy. What if you got 20 minutes of iPad time before homework, right? Asking those concrete questions to sort of make sure that they are also part of the decision making process that's going to get them to meet their goals and avoid, again, that screaming match. So this is another great article that just gives, again, some concrete language that you can share with parents. I think with all of these tools, I would say that one through line is like, these are also things that you can do role plays with parents, right? Like you perhaps offering some of your personal experiences and having parents maybe even role play language. This is something that, this is a moment in time where I think I mentioned this on the last time, I really believe it's going to take a village. So how can we offer some of these resources in a way that is practical and that allows parents to come together as a community and share what they're finding to be helpful in a safe environment. So with that, I definitely want to allow a couple of minutes to get questions, reactions, either on the resources themselves or even just initial thoughts on how you might be able to use these in the context of work that you're already doing. And we are definitely going to be digging into that more in the breakouts, but happy to take any initial thoughts here as well, in addition to questions. And pull my chat box up. You can either put it in the chat or feel free to share on video.
And you all should be unmuted. So we're keeping things simple here by, just pipe up. You can do the raise the hand or put it in chat, but also just pipe up. I know that we saw in the chat, a lot of folks were saying, that these were some pretty cool resources and, very helpful. So any of you who made those kinds of comments, feel free to sort of elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah.
And tell us how you might think to use that.
Hi, this is Jennifer Thomas with the Housing Authority of City of Los Angeles. So I'd like a copy of the slides because we, at least in LA, we have service providers that run our gyms that have really pivoted their programming to offer learning pods on site for families that don't have internet access. And one of the things that we've learned is, there's been some slide. I mean, kids are actually, falling behind and are needing to catch up. So it's not just offering the digital access so that they can, log on for virtual school, but it's also providing the tutorial support after school to catch them up. So I guess my question is, one of the things that we as a housing authority are not able to successfully gauge is how parents are faring in the household with multiple children, if they're having to work and facilitate at home learning. But what we are seeing is that there is an increase in mental health services requests. And so just trying to facilitate all that is a little difficult if folks don't have internet, because everybody's moving towards a telehealth type of rollout for mental health services. So I guess my question is, how do you advise housing authorities that have parents in households that are having to facilitate this process, in terms of just social emotional learning with their children and infusing. I mean, this that's why I want a copy of this PowerPoint, because I think it'd be great for our providers. But then how do we get this information to the parents?
Yeah, so thank you for sharing that. I would say a couple things. So, in terms of how to get the information to them, I think thinking about any natural connections that you might have through those learning pods, right? So, are you working with the school in any coordinated way through the learning pods, right? Could there be, parent newsletters or, a texting if they're doing any kind of texting to parents that you could complement with or supplement in terms of sharing some of these resources. If there's any kind of communication, in backpacks through the child, right? We've in the past sometimes done when we, on the next section, I'm going to be showing a one pager that we can customize for you with your logo. In the past, we used to do it through backpacks through Scholastic and through the National PTA. So thinking about those natural opportunities where you might be able to reach families in a way that isn't more onerous on what you might already be doing. In terms of sort of distinguishing between the mental health, we've all been following that in the news as well, and it's really alarming. I think there is another group, if I'm not mistaken, through HUD around mental health. I mean, there's definitely obviously a pretty big distinction there. And certainly really important for parents to get connected to those telehealth resources around mental health. In terms of sort of this more, I would say, social emotional issues like keeping kids motivated. This is exactly why we created this resource, right? Like there are lots of organizations coming together, and that's what we try to do, is sort of curate the best of the best. And I would say sharing these resources with parents through those natural avenues. I just think this is also just a really important time of year, right? We're about to head into a couple weeks off from school. Parents, if they have lost their jobs, might be, feeling a bit down and out. They're going to have more time with kids. It's an important time for them to not feel alone. And that was another reason why we chose to do these videos, just to communicate to parents that they're not alone. Others have these questions.
Now, this is right on time. I'm ready for the meetings. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, thanks for the great questions. So I think we're going to move on to the next topic. And again, we're going to have plenty of time in breakouts to answer more questions. And also your exact question about how to reach parents is the kind of thing we're hoping to roll up our sleeves together in the breakouts. All right, so moving along. So the other topic that you identified as important, and this is near to dear my heart because this is a lot where the chunk of time that I spend at Learning Heroes is around sort of, we're continuing to push ourselves, leaning into our parent research with not only parents, but also teachers on how we can help strengthen that parent-teacher, not just communication, but partnership. And so, I think you all, as you're, doing these learning pods and creating these additional support services are in such an important role right now, right? Where you really could be helping connect the dot and sort of identify gaps or flags between what you're observing with students and their virtual learning and communicating to parents, helping parents know what to be asking teachers, what to be, really pushing the system to make sure they're meeting the needs of all of our students. So wanted to highlight a couple of, again, free bilingual resources that can also be customized The first one is this Ready to Partner. So at Learning Heroes, we always we have 3 seasonal campaigns at key moments in time in the school year. And they involve social media and a website landing page. It also involves this one-pager, which one-pagers that can be distributed in print or digitally. And we can actually customize these with your logo. You'll see at the bottom, our national partners are Univision and National PTA. But we could customize these with your logo if you'd like. And basically, the one for this moment in time is all about supporting parents with tips and ideas on how to partner with their child's teacher. So we know that now more than ever, teachers really alone. And parents don't want to, they don't feel that they are the teacher, they're not the teacher. So how do we really leverage each unique role and bring them together? So some of the messages and ideas are these that you see here. So the first is really communicating to parents that their voice is needed, right? They have the opportunity and should be raising concerns in a positive way, raising ideas for improvement as the situation continues to evolve, letting teachers know when and how to communicate with them if they are not sitting in front of email all day, getting those alerts and changes, letting them know when's the best time to text them or be in touch, those kinds of things. I should have highlighted that for each one of these tips and ideas on here, there are more in-depth resources once you click through from the page, which is click through to Be a Learning Hero, and there's more resources. We then have other thoughts and ideas around creating a plan with teachers, and I'm going to show you that specific resource that this clicks through to in a second. Leaning into how your child is feeling, and when you click through here, it's additional videos, not the ones that I highlighted, but other ones on how to support social and emotional learning at home. So I wanted to just highlight this again, because this is an opportunity that we could co-brand for you. And again, is all research-based and leans into parents' questions and concerns as it relates to partnering with teachers. The next tool that I wanted to highlight, and this is one of the tools that you get from that one-pager, is we have found in our research that, I think I shared this in the last time, but I wanted to just reinforce it. You might remember that for those of you that were on the last session, the poll that we did, we've consistently seen that 90% of parents believe their child is at or above grade level in reading and math. 90%. And we know, unfortunately, that for many of our children, according to state and national data, it's closer to just a third of our students at grade level. And so for us, that speaks to an alarming disconnect that many parents are being left in the dark. They're relying on grades alone, and teachers really communicate to us that grades really mean effort even more than they mean mastery. So we believe that there's more that we can be doing to empower families, letting them know that there are different ways that they can really get a better picture of how their child is progressing, so that they know where and how to get support and help. So this tool is really simple. This is something that you could share again via text or via any of those workshops. If you were to distribute that one pager that I just showed, it clicks through from there. And it's a simple 3-step process. The first one is parents take the readiness check, which is a tool. It takes a couple of minutes. Click through and just give you a sense of what it is. The child answers 3 to 5 questions in math and reading from last year. So if you're a rising 3rd grader, you would take 2nd grade, and you would choose math or reading, and then the parent gets to see how their child has progressed with grade level skills needed for this year. At the end, they then get videos and activities to support those important skills at home. So this is a great resource for, especially now with the break coming up, just to sort of get a gut check on how their child is progressing. So you would do that short activity with your child. And then you would come back here and you would just take some notes. How is my child doing? What did they struggle with on the readiness check? If they're a rising 3rd grader and they got all of the answers wrong from 2nd grade, that might be a flag that they need some refresh, some additional support from last year's skills. And especially right now, when we know that there was so much lost learning time because of the spring, it's important that we support parents in being proactive. So you would take notes here. and how your child did with the readiness check. The second part is about life skills, jotting down any changes that you might see in their child's social emotional changes. If they're feeling disconnected to learning, if they're not motivated, if they don't want to log on to Zoom, or they've have lost touch with their friends, those are really important signs or flags that you might want to share with your child's teacher. In addition to that, you sharing what your child enjoys, what they're doing well with, where they need help. Again, leaning into you parents as the experts of their children. And this is a good time of year for you to sort of support parents in checking in with teachers and sharing these insights. So that's the second part. And then the third part is just giving parents a couple of concrete questions to ask. For many parents, parent-teacher conferences this year were virtual. They might have been short, they might have been informative, they might not have been. So again, as you're doing these learning hubs, you sit in such an important place, sort of at the center of this, where you could support parents with some of these tools. They could do it again, either with you, or you could send it to them and give them some context around them. It just gives them some concrete language to go back to their teachers and get support, especially at this sort of mid-year point. So they would, hopefully talk to their teacher, take some notes, and then they could either print it or email it to themselves, or to the teacher if they want to be part of, like I said, being proactive and keeping that communication open. So with that, I'm going to pause, as I know I had to go through that one quickly. If there's any questions about the tools, I think I'm going to stick to questions about the tools primarily, because we're going to get into sort of implementation and action planning in the breakouts. Any questions about the tools themselves? Or broadly answered?
We have one question.
Yeah.
So I've only been on the team with Atlanta Housing a little over a year, and I know our APS liaison Jerry has been on for a couple of years, and so it's interesting to see how you guys have pods and all of these things in place, because we're on the front end of still establishing relationships and just services that we provide to the students. And so I'm wondering, just specifically, how do you guys use these tools generally? What is this, through the school, or is this through the housing department? How do you guys specifically use these tools?
Yeah, really great question. So we designed these tools. At Learning Heroes, we're not direct service providers. So we design tools really informed by parents, by our parent research, and then we design them to be adapted. And that's why I mentioned the co-brands, to be designed by our partner organization. So like I mentioned, we work with PTA. So they co-branded, and they, when we were in person, they distributed them via backpacks and during events. They've since been using them digitally. In my role, this is the first time I'm working with HUD. In my previous role at Scholastic, I did some work with NYCHA, where we had some family engagement literacy workshops as part of the work that they were doing. But really these resources were intended to be used in multiple formats by organizations, not in sort of a one-off way, but just integrated into what you were already doing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So we're going to be doing more of sort of this kind of conversation in the breakouts. One of the, and I think, Margaret, you're going to go into logistics before I go into the questions. Is that right?
Yes. So I'll let Jennifer just highlight for us.
Yes, absolutely. Welcome, everyone. So glad to continue this engagement in some smaller groups. In a moment, a box will pop up inviting you to join an assigned room. Please click join. If you're on the phone only, just give it an extra second. It will get you assigned. There might be a brief pause as you get transferred into the room, but then Wendy will be in a breakout room, and then halfway through our time, she will switch to the other breakout room. Kylene will be in one as well to facilitate these discussions. So I will go ahead and open those rooms.
Not yet. Yeah, let Wendy do the questions and how we'll sort of be running the breakouts. And then once she's ready, you can click the invitations.
Awesome.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so to help, and really honestly, to me, the purpose of these groups is to have it be most beneficial to you. So I'm okay with messy conversations if it evolves to be slightly more organic. But to help jumpstart, what we wanted to do is provide some guiding questions. So the first one that we thought would be, it's just starting from a place of what you're hearing, right? What are you hearing from families in terms of challenges and capacity? Then moving on to key partners, who else needs to be at the table to help you advance the work? And what existing strategies or efforts might you build on? So both of your good questions, right? Like what are you already doing that you could perhaps tap these resources for and expand on? And then third, and we might not get to this fully, we thought that we might sort of building on the first two parts, start some action planning. I know many of you have done resource mapping. So as it relates to these two themes in particular, the social emotional piece and communicating with schools and teachers, especially as it seems like lots of you are doing learning pods, what might be some of those next steps? So for that last part, in terms of action plan, we put together a really simple handout, which was emailed. If you do want to be sort of jotting down notes for yourselves, some really sort of simple action plan items, sort of objective, considering what challenges you are addressing based on what you're hearing from families, thinking about resources that you might want to tap, maybe some of the ones that I mentioned, or, there were lots of other ones in that handout from last time. I just highlighted a couple that I thought are really user-friendly. Partner roles, both internal and external, right? So I think many of you mentioned grandparents on the last call, right? How might we be leveraging those roles in our communities and within our families? And then moving on to strategy, right? Like how might you be able to embed these resources if you are communicating, if you do have learning pods, the examples that I gave, putting these, one pagers in backpacks to go home with kids, digital communication that you might be doing. And then finally, time frame in terms of, I know for lots of us in the family engagement space, this is a really important time of year. We're trying to support families. And then we're also even just looking ahead to end of year and summer. What can we be doing to help parents in those important transition points? So with that, I think now we'll break out and continue the conversation. And we will be coming back together. It probably will only be for a couple of minutes, but we will come back together and sort of regroup. We're all back together again after being together and not together in other outside virtual worlds. So thank you guys for your patience and flexibility. We wanted to experiment a little bit, and you'll let us know at the end if this was helpful or not. It might have been too short of a time. But we wanted to allow that time to problem solve a little bit together. And with the couple of minutes that we have left, wanted to sort of just share some of the things. And so I'll be really fast to kick us off. And Margaret, are you back on as well? There we are. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can go ahead and start with group 2. And so we're talking about, a lot of the barriers that families face. They're very real. It's, not necessarily education at the time. It might be a priority, but not at the top of the list with what they're dealing with. We also talked about the issues of language still being a barrier. I was sharing that all of the resources that I shared are at least in English and in Spanish, and just the use, how we can use technology like PowerPoint, doing captions to communicate to families. And then we were ending on a really rich, important point that Jennifer was making around policy and hopefully what kind of support we might be getting from the government in terms of making sure that adequate learning supports are reaching all children, given the learning loss that is very real right now.
And I'll just bring up that one of the things in group one, certainly I think the primary what parents are experiencing is just general overwhelmedness, and sort of, I think the paralysis that kind of can cause. But one thing that did come up was that in Phoenix, they have established a school-based case manager, either one or two, and are doing home visits, as well as some of the teachers are doing home visits. And the teachers are meeting with the parents directly, either remote, in a virtual situation. And that seemed to me to be a great way of both addressing some of the social emotional issues, as well as a great communication tool. So.
Absolutely. Home visits, there's lots of research just about the impact of those. Actually, doing home visits while I was teaching is how I got into family engagement. I just found them to be so powerful. That is another place where you could share some of the resources, especially things like the one pager, because it gives you just sort of a guiding place, sort of here's 5 concrete themes. What do you want to touch on? Here are some resources that can support learning at home. So that's really great.
And just one other quick note, we heard from Denisha from St. Louis, and, while parents might feel overwhelmed in order to get their attention, that sometimes incentives does work, especially when the incentives are something that their child is going to get, because they're often, if their child is excited about it, they're excited about it. And also, she said, just being positive and using positive language really helps families feel that they are valued.
Absolutely.
And I think unless Wendy, you want anything else to say, I thought we would move quickly into our final polls if folks can stick around for them. This poll in particular helps us fashion our next and tweak our next education exchange, peer exchange. So please stick around. We have 3 polling questions. This one will help us with our planning. And the other 2 are around sort of the use of breakouts. And that looks, if we get a few more, there we go. We can see how many of you have put in your data. So. All right, and I think we will close it out in just a few minutes, give you guys, or just a few seconds, give you guys. All right, well, thank you. This is going to give us some very good information. Particularly, I see that the supplemental virtual out of school time is a key factor, and that was actually already on our list. So that's wonderful that we're still in alignment. And then we have 2 more polls for which you won't see results, but please stick around. And if Jennifer can, we won't see results.
Apparently it is set up that way.
Okay, and we can close that out. If it's possible to definitely not show the next poll, that would be ideal.
I'm not able to adjust that at the moment.
Okay. How about if we relaunch the polling?
And then as we're waiting, I just wanted to mention that it sounds like, I don't know, and most of us didn't get to the action planning part, but if the plan is helpful to you, great for us to know. You can do it on your own time, or we can see what your thoughts on about building on that for next time. within these other topics.
So Margaret, I'm not able to adjust the settings on that final poll. Do you want to
Okay,
go ahead
so
and launch it or not?
we will skip that final poll.
Terrific. Okay.
Okay. And thank you so much for sticking around.
Margaret,
and
do we
thank you-
also have the small group breakout poll?
that's the one that's right there. And that's complete.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you all. Thank you for attending.
Yes, thank you for your time. Happy holidays.